Uppity Unicorn here. I have gotten quite a lot of questions about the photo I am sharing. So I thought that I might go over a few things about that time in my life when I was studying abroad in South Africa. So the assignment was we were studying apartheid and the post-apartheid society of South Africa. For those of you who don't know, apartheid is based on, the Jim Crow South, basically Jim Crow laws and black codes and all these different things in America. And while we did away with those things in the 60s, apartheid South Africa was not, apartheid as a regime was not ended until 1994. So when you think of the fallout, in the 90s, for example, of, the effects of slavery, black codes, Jim Crow, sharecropping, the Reconstruction, and the failure of that. And we were dealing with that even in the 90s. So for them, for their system to have ended in the 90s, the fallout is still very, very dramatic. And what I mean by fallout is basically the hangovers of such an intensely uh, brutal reign of terror, a brutal regime on Native South Africans. So, how did I get this opportunity? The opportunity came as I was a matriculating student at the University of Washington. I eventually graduated from there and graduated again from Seattle University and graduated again from Dar Zahra in Yemen. However, for this specific study abroad, because I say all that to say I've studied abroad and lived abroad quite a bit. But for this specific opportunity, I was basically up against, hundreds of students who wanted my position. And there were only going to be about, 15 of us who were going to be able to go on this trip. And the competition was an essay competition. And so, for those of you who know, I'm quite the seasoned writer, whether it's essays, personal statements, articles, songs, screenplay, I do all of it. Anyhow, so I got my hands, on a friend of mine. We decided to go together. So I wrote her essay in mine, and we placed. We beat out loads of students based on that essay. Excuse me, on those essays. So, all right, that happens. I compete with the essay. It's good. It's accepted by the professors in the program. We're on our way. So, this is the first time in my life that I ever went through the process of getting a passport and dealing with, offices in Washington, D.C., and, getting shots and all these different things. And I was fortunate because I had a friend who was formerly an immigrant who became a citizen. So all these governmental bureaucracies, she was familiar with them. So in the same way that I facilitated this for her in terms of writing her essay for her to be able to compete and win a spot, she also was able to facilitate these things for me by, there was so much she had to go through in order to become a citizen, and they have to get familiar with so many different programs as refugees and immigrants. So, it's a symbiotic relationship. Anyhow, the flying to South Africa, it's the longest time. It was 28 hours total in the air. And of course, this is not Spirit Airlines, all right? We were flying KLM. And so, of course, when you're in the air for that long, the airplanes are, even if you are not in first class or business class, there's so much leg room. They're so big, they're so broad, they're so wide. Your seat reclines completely. And the food was amazing. My friend was, I was still a fairly conservative Christian at the time, and my friend was Muslim. So I went on ahead and agreed to order halal food for the flight. And oh my goodness, the curries and the chicken tikka masala, everything was so good. And I'm just like, this is airplane food. So I really enjoyed that. But I did almost get a little bit like antsy being in the air for so long because there were like maybe 2 or 3 flights. So maybe one flight was 4 hours, another flight was 6 hours, and then never another was, 11 hours in the daggone air. And it's like, oh my God, get me out of here. But again, there were so many movies, there were so many things going on. And now, you have Wi-Fi on the flight. So, you can be live on YouTube, whatever. But of course, this was years and years and years and years and years ago. Anyhow, so the flight there and back, the service was amazing. The flight attendants were amazing. I started realizing that I prefer to fly internationally as opposed to flying locally in the US. It's just a different caliber of plane, a different quality of flight, whatever else. So that was about $2,000. $2,000. I'd say, yeah, like 1,800 for the way there, 1,800 for the way back. Maybe it's cheaper now, I don't know, but that's how it was back then. So the group, this picture is of the only Black people on the trip. Okay, so that's why the three of us are together. And when we got to South Africa, those two were still Black, and I was not. And I wasn't ready for that as an experience at all because I had been told by a biracial African American that I would still be Black. Whereas, he was Black in America as a football player, but when he went to South Africa, he was no longer Black, he was colored. I was colored. And, I wasn't prepared for that at all. But anyhow, this is not my group, but I'm sharing this picture because I want to give you an idea of what that really looked like for us. Now that does look like my professor right there in the hat. It looks just like maybe he aged a little. Um, but if you see, it's basically we're white, we're white, we're white, we're white, we're Asian, sprinkle a little bit of Black in there. And the Black is, and you're the only African American. So there's a little Black girl back here with some braids. And maybe she's Habesha, I don't know. But basically, I was the only African American. And during that time, a lot of in my teens, a lot of Habeshas and East Africans in specific, they did not know that they were Black, you know, in America. Now they do. Now the ones that were born here know, but by far with the refugee immigrant populations, they were just like, Black? What do you mean Black? I'm not Black. I'm Ethiopian. I'm Eritrean. I'm Somali. I'm Oromo. I'm Ogaden. I don't know what you mean. So their consciousness was fairly different from my own. So oftentimes I would be into it with some of my white classmates, and no one would have my back. So it'd be me talking, it'd be me against 13 different people in a conversation, and the two other people who are figuring out that they're Black are silent. I remember the Eritrean girl specifically. She just kind of, she really looked down on me for most of the trip. The trip was about 40 days, just over a month. And she really looked down on me for, I would say, maybe the first 2.5 weeks because her idea of an African American was, inferior. And she found herself getting frustrated with the group. And then, she wanted to sound off to me. And so it was this very unique thing, like, you want to come over here and talk to me, but all of your racism, all of your colorism, all of your xenophobia, like, this is hard to deal with. But I dealt with it because, I was a child, so my heart was very tender, very open, very forgiving. Anyhow, so my professor's name was Nikhil Singh. So Nikhil and Singh are both very popular names in India and the subcontinent. We stayed in a hostel, that entire group of students of, teenagers and students in their early 20s. We stayed in a fairly large hostel in South Africa, in Cape Town, South Africa. So we had a white driver who was to die for. He was so beautiful, but so rugged. White South Africans remind me quite a bit of white Australians in that they just get the hell down. They don't care, They're not like, I don't know, it's like UK white people and certain American white people, they have a way about themselves, whereas, like they give me Steve Irwin vibes, where they just get the hell down and they're just super duper, rugged, I guess. Um, they get their hands dirty, they have, just total beat your chest masculinity. Anyhow, I wanna get to the caste system in South Africa. Because this takes me back to why I wasn't Black. Um, some of you may know I did not find out until fairly recently that I knew that, my grandmothers are mixed. Um, but having mixed grandmothers, for most of us as Black people, we say to ourselves, they're mixed, but I'm Black. However, I did an ancestry DNA test and I found a bunch of just so many things that I was really kind of surprised by. And I've never really understood myself as a multiracial person. So people have clocked me on my looks. Like even today, my Lyft driver, he was like, "Are you Cambodian?" And I said no, but the answer is actually yes. Yes, I mean, I have Cambodian ancestry, I have Thai ancestry, I have Chinese ancestry. Basically, uh, Roma people, or how do I say this? Um, Roma people were sold into slavery and when I say Roma, I don't mean Rome, I don't mean Romani, I mean specifically like I mean I do mean like Afro Romani, and basically there are these people. If you've ever heard of the Hunchback of Notre Dame and Esmeralda, that character, those people have been kicked around Earth, okay, for millennia. They have been kicked around Earth. Excuse me, not for millennia, for centuries. And basically, many of those people ended up in Europe and were rounded up and sold from Europe into chattel slavery, specifically in the state of Louisiana. So not Oklahoma, not Mississippi, not Florida, specifically to the state of Louisiana. And all this time, I thought that I was Creole. I thought I was Creole. But what the Roma people do, because they are so incredibly discriminated against, is they never say that they are Roma. They blend into whatever group of people that they become a part of. So, Roma people who were here, they would say, "I'm African American, I'm Creole, I'm whatever." They just blend into the group because they're so afraid to announce their identity due to centuries. So, anyhow, long story short, I just found that out. So, it's crazy the way Asian people have clocked me all of my life as Asian. And it's funny because African Americans have too, but I just thought it was like they were being mean about the shape of my eyes or something. I didn't know that that was like a real thing, and people were actually clocking me as multiracial. So anyhow, I was clocked again as multiracial based upon my physical appearance in South Africa. So the racial tier goes like this: you have whites on the top. You have Asians in the middle, and Trevor Noah has talked about this, right? His dad is a Swiss man, and his mother is Xhosa, right? The people of Nelson Mandela. So you have white people on the top; they're the colonizers; they run the society. You have Asian people on the second tier. You have coloreds on the third tier, and then you have Black Africans on the bottom. So all of my consciousness, all of my life, I grew up at these, Malcolm X rallies and these Umoja fests and this very Black, now it's gentrified, but this very Black place in Seattle called the Central District. So I had no wherewithal to be understood as multiracial. And that was extremely traumatic because I could be walking with these two African women and people would treat us totally differently. And it would it just hurt my heart so much. A white woman came right into the face of the darker girl who was from Somalia. And she says, "You look like a big hat." And she goes, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, you don't speak Afrikaans?" And she's like, "No, what is that? What does that mean?" And she's like, "Oh, it means you're beautiful." And the woman walked away, she was laughing, and then, the Somali girl was just standing there with big eyes, and I'm just like, "What did she say to you?" And she's like, "She said, 'Bilha.'" And so, like, I went around, and this is why my accent is different, because if I would have been like, "Oh, what's a billa?" Nobody would have known what I was talking about. So whenever I say something from another language, I'm sure to try to say it in their accent and with native like fluency. So I went to these different white South Africans, and then I ended up going to my driver, right? David, who was a blonde haired, blue eyed South African, Afrikaans, white, Dutch child of a colonizer, whatever. And he was like, "Oh, it means he's like, "Oh, it means a fly. It's a fly, yeah." And I'm like, "A fly? What do you mean a fly? Like she's fly? Like she's hella fly? Like, well, like what?" He was like a bug. Like, think of it like a fly with those big ass eyes and the little skinny black head and what. And I was like, "Holy hell!" So she walked right into the face of this girl who was in her early 20s, and it's just like, "You look like a bug." And there were a bunch of white people around. We didn't understand because we don't speak Afrikaans. But there were all these people around us and nobody cared and everybody heard it. But the nature of aggression and the fact that she was a small white woman, and like, I could have monkey stomped her ass if I understood what was going on. But like, we missed it. And stuff like that happened quite a bit. And we were so confused. We were so confused. And so we would revisit these events, and we're just like, "Oh crap, this meant that, and this is what they were trying to do." um so anyways, that's the colorist, the caste system that was supposedly allegedly dismantled, but I mean, it still is that way, honestly. um Supposedly dismantled in 1994, but honestly, after having been there, I would say that it's still pretty. They've made small strides, just like how in America we've made strides, but some things are just still the same, i.e., police brutality, things that kind of target Black people, gerrymandering, redlining, things like this. Um, so again, the assignment was, we were basically going around, KwaZulu Natal and Cape Town, Wynberg, South Africa. At the time, Cape Town was the most violent city on earth. So it had the highest murder rate on earth. So, I just thought I thought I was such a gangster. I'm like, man, yeah, like whatever. And I'm just like, once I got there, I was just like, who's doing these ratings? Because it's just very interesting when people tell you, oh, don't go to that country. They killing each other over there and they drop bombs and they got wars and blah, blah, blah. And I would say to that, it's just like somebody telling you, America is so violent, because it is. We have people getting slaughtered in their classrooms and things, and it's just, I would say to people, well, avoid this neighborhood, avoid that neighborhood. Like if there's Bloods and Crips and folks and they're funking with each other, there's beef. Okay, you avoid that, and everything else is beautiful. There's still the mountains in America. There's still the suburbs in America. There's still, and every other country is like that. So people talk you into thinking if you go to Somalia, you're going to get your head blown off at a makeshift roadblock, and it's just not so. There may be certain places and certain cities and certain regions of cities that are violent, but by and large, no. But here's what I will say. Some of these little kids in South Africa were incredibly gangster, were incredibly finesse you, pickpocket you. Like you did have to be very careful. But again, like, if you're from an American hood, these are things You know how to be safe. Whereas if you're from an American suburb or gated community, maybe, you would have gotten your pockets picked or, held up by a stick-up kid or something. Anyhow, I want to get into the Google 827. This is a very sore memory for me. I actually went to a movie theater and they were playing a movie that had just come out a few years ago about the Google 827. And a man stood up and he said his name and he said, my friend was one of the Google 827, and he immediately passed out and fell on his head. All over South Africa, young Black South Africans were just blown away by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds, Trojan horse style. I mean, just mowed down like a lawn. And what hurt me so much about this is that my group looked like this. Actually, this group is a little bit more diverse. I see more Asians here and more people of color here than was in my group. So my group, when they would hear things about, like you've seen Serafina starring Whoopi Goldberg, you know, um, and all these freedom fighters in South Africa who were tortured during apartheid, um, where there are these kids marching, and these authorities just open fire on the entire crowd. Whew, I'm losing my breath just talking about it. And so, what was crazy about South Africa is that it's almost like some of these places in Cape Town, it was almost like an open, like New Orleans, like how they call New Orleans the city of the dead. I'm just like, everywhere I look, it's basically a cemetery. It's a cemetery, it's a cemetery, it's a cemetery. There's a monument, there's a monument, there's a monument. Back when I went to South Africa, this monument was fairly new. It had only been standing for a few years. But these were boys. They were in their late teens, early 20s, and they were mowed down, and one of them was dragged through the streets by a rope. So maybe it was more than one of them, but I remember one in specific because his mom turned on the news and saw her son's lifeless body being dragged through the street. So his skin is burning off of his body, and it's on the ground. So you can see black skin and blood and all kinds of meat, and just dragging him like some kind of a victory, because these were freedom fighters, but they were considered terrorists as far as the white South African regime was concerned. So I read the full book on my channel, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she talks about her time in South Africa. And it was very similar for me because I cried all over South Africa. Good God. Everywhere they took me, I cried. There's a monument, I cried. There's a story, I cried. There's an apartheid tour, I cried. There's a South African choir of children singing to us to welcome us, I cried. And Joy talked about how they cried all over South Africa, and every time they cried, all the South African women started singing. And when I say South African women, forgive me, I don't mean all of them. I mean specifically the Black women, specifically Xhosa people. Okay, I am messing up the click. That's not the accurate click for Xhosa, but I have in my Invisaligns, so I'll ruin it. But if you want to hear the proper clicks, what is it? I just mentioned him earlier. The South African comedian. He'll say it the right way for you. Anyhow, so I'm crying all over South Africa. All the murder, all the just mowing down these babies. It's like how you see in the American footage, there's a documentary called Keep Your Eyes on the Prize, where you see all of the civil rights activists and these people who are marching. You see all these little girls in dresses. They're fourth graders and sixth graders and 11th graders. And so many of them were just, hosed down. And when we're looking at them, we think that we're looking at grown adults. But when you start looking at them closing those padded wagons and all those big jail cars where they round up 30 people and give them a rough ride in something like a van, you see their faces and their children. So many of the South African freedom fighters, they were led by adults, but they were children. And so I'm crying my heart out, right? And I'm in a group that looks like this. And all they can say is, man, that's effed up. Man, that's like so effed up. Oh man, that's so like sad, man. But we get to the monument of a white girl who showed up white at a meeting of the African National Congress, the ANC. And she's totally on the side of the black people. She's totally an ally. She's a true ally to black South Africans. And the black South African crowd, they thought she was an op. They thought she was a spy. They thought she was a Benedict Arnold or whatever it is, a double, triple agent. They killed that girl. So as I'm wiping the tears away from my eyes, because I've been crying all over South Africa, I look at my group and they're all crying. Y'all, for the first time, the entire group is crying. And so immediately, I lose my breath, and the other African girls, we sit in the back of the bus and we whisper about it. We go and sit, and we were all over South Africa, just like the damn three amigos. None of us talked today. But we were in South Africa like the three damn amigos, because we were sick. We were sick with our group, and they just didn't understand why we were so sick. Especially because I was the only person voicing that sickness and that illness. But what I'm trying to say is, when all these black mothers, children, fathers, freedom fighters, religious leaders, people who run orphanages, when they were all mowed down like a lawn, their eyes were dry. But when they saw the life of a white girl that was taken unjustly, they could barely breathe. And I said, you hypocrites, you don't see us as human. Why are you here? You're here to make yourself feel good on some fake humanitarian something. The white American has no superiority over the white South African, and you guys prove it every day. Those people wanted me. They hated me so bad. They hated me so bad because I clocked everything every time. And what sucked is that we would have these conversations as a class, and they would all decide that they were right and I was wrong, and then we would go on some kind of apartheid tour, and all of our hosts and all of our tour guides would be saying exactly what I was saying, and I would just have my nose all the way up in the air, my chin up. I'd be smiling with all my teeth hanging out of my mouth, like, what was said? Oh yeah, oh okay, and rightfully so. Because we were talking about the lives of, we're talking about oppression, we're talking about what's right and what's wrong, and what so many Africans and people of color and indigenous people have been cost via colonialism. And they wanted to turn their nose up at certain things. And I'm just like they wanted to be like, oh, white South Africans are so bad. I'm like, what do you mean they're so bad? Explain to me what you mean when you are their model. Explain to me what you mean when apartheid is based off of Jim Crow, one preceded the other. I need you to explain to me, what do you mean? Why do you separate yourselves from these people so much? You are guilty of the same. Your ancestors are guilty of the same. You are the same people. You are the same colonizers. Don't look at these present day white South Africans any differently than you look at yourselves. Whatever change you think you can make here, you can be making at home. You didn't have to come to South Africa to realize black people were being wronged. You could have did that in America. Man, I was letting that group have it. And I didn't realize how weighty it was on them until I got older. Because I thought they were in such a clear wrong. I'm just like, why are they being so mean to me? Everybody is being so mean to me. And the East African girls barely thought they were black, so they didn't necessarily have my back. But I think I got food poisoning one time, and they were like ganging up on me as I could. I mean, my eyelashes were sore. My eyelashes, my nail beds. When you have food poisoning, good Lord, everything is it feels terrible, And so they would try to bait me into these conversations when the professor wasn't around. And I'm just like, y'all not my friends like that. I'm not trying to get to know you like that. But when I had food poisoning, I was, laid out. So, they would, come in my room and call me a bunch of bitches and make different African American, stereotype jokes or whatever. And I'm just like, this is so uncalled for. But I realize now that I was doing their shadow work for them in front of them. And shadow work is very painful when you have to look at your ugly and own it. And I was doing that to and for everybody because no one was where I was with the material. Because obviously I grew up a pro-Black. I grew up, Malcolm X this and Medgar Evers that. So I grew up with that consciousness back when woke people were really woke and not just trying to, have a look. Anyhow, so this is me on top of, this is me with some of the group on top of this. So this side of the mountain, the side of the mountain we were standing on is called Table Mountain. The back side of it that we did not hike up, but we were able to look at was called the 12 disciples. And that's because all these little ripples, if you look at them, there are exactly 12 of them. So we were standing on this side of the mountain. You see how that's flat like a table? You see how it's flat up top like a table? That's facing one side and we call it Table Mountain. But when you're looking at the back and you can almost see some of it from the corner, we call those the 12 disciples. So again, I'll just go back to this picture and keep talking. But basically throughout the tours, I was just so emotional because I got everything. I understood everything. And Nelson Mandela was already a hero of mine. I was already plugged into apartheid, in the 90s. I was already plugged into, even growing up. To this day, my favorite song is Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. And we all know that Mike was an incredible humanitarian. Mike and Nelson Mandela have met one another. Naomi Campbell is an incredible humanitarian. So everybody I looked up to, basically, I looked up to Princess Diana. I looked up to Michael Jackson. I looked up to Naomi Campbell. I looked up to Mother Teresa or Teresa. All of these people dealt with Nelson Mandela. All of these people dealt with orphans and widows, and that was just my orientation. So what was new to these people was old to me because I started having this orientation as a very small child because we didn't have a choice being Black in America in the 90s. Like we had to be accustomed with this. We sat there as children and watched these cops beat the hell out of Rodney King. We listened in the car to the news with our parents and things like this. So we were already accustomed to so much of this violence. And they were being blown away and traumatized. And then they had me, at their, on their necks. I did not shut up until my professor was like, class dismissed. But by the time you dismiss the class, I'm just like, I don't know you, don't talk to me, we're not friends, don't engage me in a conversation, I'm tired, whatever it is. If anything, I wanted to engage more with the safari. I wanted to engage more with the locals. Like I just really didn't have it to be friendly with my group, except for, a few of the guys. I think one of them, he was like, I bet you don't even know my name. And I was like, he goes, what's my name? And I'm like, Gladiator. And the reason that's funny is because for years after that, even on his Facebook, he was a gladiator. Because remember the movie Gladiator where they're asking Russell Crowe what his name is, and he doesn't say Marcus Aurelius, blah, 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 blah. He says Gladiator. And because he was so white and he looked so Roman to me, I was just like, Gladiator? So that became a thing. We had a Gladiator number 2, like crazy, And even with him, the part of the reason I didn't know his name is because I didn't like he was a photographer and I had to get used to him being a photographer, but I didn't like that he was taking picture of all these kids all the time. And I'm like, did you get permission from their parents? Like, these are not animals. These are not. And he was a kid himself, he's in his teens. So he's not sure what the etiquette is. And I had to give him that because at first I was like, racist, racist, racist. And I'm like, okay, he's a kid like I'm a kid. Like, maybe he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand. And he was actually really cool. And whenever those the white girls in my group wanted to get together and have a bash, a bash uppity session, uh him and the Mormon kid would be the ones to stand up for me. And the Mormon kid was a guy as well. His name was Brian. Hey, Brian, I remember you. Just fabulous character on this Mormon kid. Anyhow, so Robben Island is where Nelson Mandela was held for so many years as a political prisoner. And so they took us to Robben Island, and I took a picture with my hands hanging on the jail cell of Nelson Mandela. And when I walked into the cell, I cried because I'm claustrophobic. And the cell was about, I'm in a tiny, I'm in the sunroom of my sister's house right now. We call it the kids' classroom. But I mean, it's surrounded by 2 decks, and what I'm trying to say is his jail cell, this is already a small room that I'm in. His jail cell was maybe a fourth, 1/4 of this room. Like, literally, if he laid down, he would be touching the top and the bottom of, like the whole square footage of the room. And, that hurt my heart so bad. And so, I got to a point where all over South Africa, I was wearing sunglasses. I have on the sunglasses in this picture. And here's the deal. It was not, I mean, of course, on top of a mountain, it's bright, but it was winter in South Africa. And when I say winter, I mean, we were on the beach with penguins, bro. And penguins are funky 9,000. Penguins smell so bad. I was so frustrated with them. I'm like, you come from ice, bro. How do you smell so bad? You come from straight ice, bro. Anyhow, what I'm saying is that it was cold, it was rainy, it was cloudy, but I had been crying so much that my eyes were just swollen. And so I began to wear glasses, and obviously we were being thronged, um, partly because they knew we were Americans, and partly because it was me. Um, all the students at every school would gather around to look at my hair. Um, it was strange to them. And it got to the point where my professor had to almost act like a bodyguard with me in specific. So all of South Africa was proposing marriage to me, except for maybe some of the Asians. But even then, there were still men who were Asian and Indian, like, oh, it's such a beautiful girl, blah, blah, blah. Um, and one of the Indian students, he commented on that. His name was Nevin. And he was just like, oh my God, chocolate is so hot here. And I was like, excuse me, Nevin? He's like, yeah, like we should just like run an experiment on you and like leave you outside and see what happens. And I'm just like, first of all, Nevin, I'm hot everywhere. And he's just like, I'm just saying because you're black, and then like he, didn't really want to go into the conversation. But what he was getting at was obviously in America, my beauty would be less valuable because of that white standard of beauty. Whereas in a country that is majority black, I mean, the ruling population is still a minority. And it's so funny. This white girl was like, yeah, well, being in a country with minorities, I was like, you can't use that word on us in this country. We're the majority here. Say black. Call us what we are. Say that word you're uncomfortable with. Man, I was on my Malcolm X, bro. I was frustrating these people and just listening to myself recall it. Wow. I myself today, uppity today, chocolate today, I probably wouldn't go that hard. But I think I was a bit merciless with their learning curve. And it makes sense to me more now why the entire group just disdained and did not like me. Except for my professor and the black girls undercover when nobody was around. The black girls would come and have me lick their wounds. Anyhow, um, so they used to torture Nelson Mandela by having him in a quarry of limestone, and they would have him quarry or pick at the rock of the lime. And when you look at the eyes of Nelson Mandela during his lifetime, they look like they're almost closed. And so much limestone had gotten into his eyes. And um, lime, when the sun hits lime, it's so brilliantly white. It's whiter than white airport paint. It's whiter than that. It's blindingly white. So imagine waking up in the morning and somebody opens, the curtain and your walls are white and you're like, nah, like close the curtain or turn off the light, like it's like that all day looking at limestone. Your eyes don't really get used to it, especially because, in certain areas there were different color rock in the quarry. And so, I sobbed for that. I sobbed for his isolation. I sobbed for his torture. I sobbed for his people. Like I just was beside myself. He has a book called The Long Walk to Freedom that he was allegedly writing while he was incarcerated, and they showed us where he was burying the parchment until finally Winnie Mandela, who is the unsung hero of the struggle against apartheid. Winnie Mandela very well was on the verge of going straight Idi Amin. Winnie Mandela was on the verge of y'all got this amount of time to get out of our country before you get expelled in the worst way. They had to free Nelson Mandela because Winnie was on some Malcolm. I would say Nelson was on some MLK, but Winnie Mandela was on some Malcolm X. She was not playing. Anyhow, a more happy memory. Uh, I wish I would have saved the photos, but basically, I was able to meet, uh, that song by Shakira, "This Time for Africa," and she's like, "Samina minam sam kalewa, this time for Africa." There's a group that sings that song with her called Freshly Ground. And Freshly Ground is it's the South African dream. It's where blacks and whites have come together. Um, I went to a Freshly Ground concert to see Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was the Archbishop of he was an Archbishop of the Catholic Church, and so he famously during his lifetime marched with the children of South Africa and the freedom fighters of South Africa. And the power of his image kept them from being mowed down. So they would have just opened fire on these people who were demonstrating and doing their freedom marches. But because South Africa would have had to answer to the Catholic Church for an archbishop, they had to let the people march because he was among them. And that did wonders for the struggle. So obviously, I'm watching him dance, and I'm so happy to see him in his little gray hair and happy body, and I'm crying again, crying all over South Africa. But I ended up separating from the group because the group hated me, and I see now why as an adult. I ended up getting away from the group for a bathroom break. And then someone started singing a song that the song gripped me. And I ended up writing a similar song, something about a world that's sleeping. And I stood there, just kind of swaying with the music. And I ran into the lead singer of Freshly Ground. I mean, I could try to share my screen and share a photo. I ran into the singer and I ran into the band. And so I'm losing my mind to their music. I'm a fan. And then I turned around and she's a Tosa girl and she's so little. And I'm African American. I had on heels. So I'm like at the time I was maybe 6'1", 6'3" in my high heels. Because back then, honey, a stiletto was my friend. All of my high heels, I mean, I just had a thing for stiletto heels. So they would always be, 4.5, 5 inches. And honey, this is oh, I have the picture over here. So this is Shakira, right? Whenever, wherever, we're meant to be together, right? These are a few of the members of Freshly Ground. So I ran into her, and she's the lead singer. I ran into her and her boyfriend, who is, I believe, this guy. So this is them much older, right? This is them all grown up. They were so young. I mean, this is obviously years ago. They were so young. I was so young. And yeah. So this is the song they did with Shakira. I think it's called Waka Waka. Anyhow, I felt like that was my gift from God because the way that this woman was looking at me, she was in awe. And she's, celebrity, whatever, big name, but she had the biggest smile on her face because I turned around and I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, that's her. And I turned around again and I just kind of like stared. And she was giving me the same look I was I was giving her. And the reason I mentioned that is because I was so isolated from the group and they would do so many petty things to me that I would be crying, so I'd be crying because of the lessons, I'd be crying because of the tours, I'd be crying because of the experiences, and then I'd be crying because the group was fairly mean to me. But I just kind of would get these gentle nudges from South African locals, like, hey, you've come a long way, baby, like you're doing a good job, keep going, you're in the right. And I would get these little blessings. I would get these little blessings that no one else was getting. One of the comrades who was tortured during apartheid, he just had this great big crush on me. And he took me out on a date. And he showed me so many things and so much of what nobody else got to see. Basically because they weren't me. We had a driver, David, and then we also had a driver named Moss, who was Xhosa. And me and one of the East African girls, we were the last to leave South Africa. Moss got so black once all of the white and Asian people were gone. He showed us a different side of himself. And here's the deal, because Moss had us, me and the African girls at his house. Something that was, not open to the non-Black students. And so finally Moss was like, I will take you now to meet Nelson Mandela. I could not give that to your classmates because they don't deserve that. And I'm like, Moss, where the hell did this woke come from? And of course I should have expected it because, like, look, he's working a job to provide for his family, to provide for his son, which that was another thing that pissed me off about the group. Moss's son was always with us, and they were always, grabbing him, touching him, taking pictures with him, and oh, his hair is so cool, and just like he was a little monkey. And they couldn't figure out why that bothered me. They thought they deserved a badge for loving on a black child. And I'm just like, you're treating him like he's an accessory or a pet. Put him down. He's a big boy. Put him down. I think he was like 5 at the time. Um, anyhow, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he wasn't such a big boy. Maybe he was 3. But I just thought it was weird the way that they handled him. Anyhow, let me go here. Um, so Moss was going to take me and the remaining African girl to meet Nelson Mandela face to face, but we had to leave. And he was so sad. I was so sad. But just knowing that that opportunity was open to me, that continued. That's an example of the kind of things that would happen for me. Whenever the group would be hard on me, some amazing opportunity would open up for me. Um, Open up for me and just for me, or open up for me and just the 2 girls who were with me. Anyhow, Hurricane Katrina happened while I was there. So, like I said, I was crying all over South Africa. And they did not have my response to the floating bodies all over New Orleans, quote, fellow Americans. And I just kind of couldn't, I was incredulous. I couldn't believe them. So anyhow, one of the more beautiful experience, and I'm closing with this. One of the more beautiful experiences I had was going to the Cape of Good Hope. And if you Google the Cape of Good Hope, you see where the saltwater ocean and the freshwater ocean, they meet and they do not mix. So it looks like God drew a straight line down the water. It's like somebody got a pencil, like you gave a kid a pencil and a ruler, and they drew a straight line down the water, and one was colored really dark blue, and one was colored a lighter version of a dark blue. And that blew my mind because in the Quran, it's like, he who created the oceans that don't mix. That was the beginning of me converting to Islam. But it was called the Cape of Good Hope. And there has to be, there's something to be said for being an American teenager, an American black teen who is literally standing on the tip of Africa. The Cape of Good Hope is the end of Africa. It's the edge of Africa. It is the southernmost tip of the continent. And I just kind of stood there in awe of God. Um, that was a really beautiful experience for me. And also at the Cape of Good Hope, I was really fed up with the hatred of my classmates. Um, like I said, as an adult, I can completely see why they were so perturbed by me. But as a kid, I'm just like, well, I'm saying the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. Why are they this level mad? So I started to purposely self isolate. You know how Black girls do. We don't want to deal with the nonsense, so we just self isolate. And my professor was like, Chocolate, you're really making yourself very hard to follow. And I'm like, what's up? And he was like, I just wanted you to know that there's no way I could have taught this course without you. He said, you brought the lessons to life. And I don't know how else this group of kids would have learned if you weren't here. I needed to hear every single word of that. There was so much gaslighting, and there was so much I got to a point where I was just like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. And in the nick of time, at the beginning of the worst part of that kind of self talk, he's just like, no, you've been amazing. You've been amazing. Um, so all of my work, he reassured me that I said all the right things. I had all the right reactions. I gave everything the right amount of drama, the right amount of tears. Like he was like, no, this is just, you're horrified, and this stuff is horrific. So I appreciated that from him. Anyhow, what's going on in South Africa is still, you can Google South Africa, and what's crazy, and what I mean by fallout and hangovers, what I was talking about at the beginning, is that, you know, you'll see homes owned by celebrities. Oh, Will and Jada Smith live there, and so lives there, and blah, blah, blah. And then just a few miles away, there's a shanty town. And these shanty towns are just pulled together by cardboard, tin roofs, no plumbing, mud floors, and it's a whole hood, and people just live in them. And I'm like, white sand beach, oceans, fine dining, couple miles away, shantytown. I was like, how can this be? When I was in Cape Town, South Africa, because I don't know if this is still the same, but when I was there, the largest disparity between the rich and poor on earth was in South Africa. You had incredible wealth, a stone's throw away from incredible poverty. It was the first time I'd seen dogs that were, emaciated and afraid of humans. I'm like, oh, it's a loose dog without a collar. Shouldn't we be scared? And they're like, that dog is scared of us. Because they would stone them, because rabies or whatever it is, you keep them away from you. Anyhow, I'm gonna close with I don't know if I want to talk about Brenda Fassie. She was a South African pop singer. She sang one of my favorite songs about the presidential inauguration of Nelson Mandela. I guess I'll link you to that song. The version that I'm familiar with, I've never been able to find on YouTube. But anyhow, Bantu. They took us to an apartheid museum. And you know how Jim Crow museums would have, you'll see where it says whites only. No blacks, dogs, or Mexicans, signs that said those kind of things. There was a sign in the South African, there was a bench. It said Slegs Blankies. Slegs Blankies. Whites only. And then it would say no Bantu. Bantu. And so immediately I see this bench and I have a seat. And the Eritrean girl immediately snapped a photo. But they wanted me to see the rest of the museum. And I was like, in a minute, I am going to sit here. For everybody who couldn't, I'm going to have a seat. I am going to have a Rosa Parks and park it on this bench because I can. And again, my consciousness is black, even though I was colored in South Africa, my consciousness is black. So I sat there as a black woman and a colored woman. Anyhow, Bantu means people. And that's what I wanted to get at. And the South Africans would have a great, or the Xhosa people of South Africa would have a great big inside joke about, look, it says no Bantu. It says no people. They don't want people to sit here. It says no people. Bantu means people, but of course they used it to mean sub-Saharan Black South African. But it's their language, it's their word, and Bantu means people. Even if you go into different languages and you see people say Bint, right? Bint, the daughter of. Bin Laden, son of. It's people. It's people. Bantu is people. Anyhow, when I was saying bint and ibn and bin, that's Arabic, but there are many languages that share these roots, and of course European languages don't. But anyhow, what's so funny about that to me, that the South Africans never said to me, is that the people of Nelson Mandela are called Xhosa. Xhosa people are the most ancient group of human beings on earth. These are the people of Trevor Noah, his black side, his mom's side. Those people are 100% hominid. They are 100% human. Whereas many of us who have European blood, who have Asian blood, we have Neanderthal DNA. We have rhesus monkey blood. That's why your blood type is positive or negative. So the great big inside joke to me was, you're saying no people to the real humans, and these people were conquered by you because they have more humanity than you. What you did to them was animalistic. What you did to them is evidence of this, Neanderthal, rhesus monkey DNA. They were more humane than this. And even with the amnesty hearings, where they forgave all manner of torture. I mean, men were hooked up to electrical apparatus with their penises until their penises no longer worked. When people were tortured in apartheid, they mean tortured. They didn't just eliminate and unalive people. They made them live through torture, picking off your fingernails and letting you bleed, burning you with light bulbs, begging you to snitch on your comrades for more information. That happened to the guy who took me out on a date. But I'm just like, this says no Bantu. And I know you mean it to mean no blacks, but you're saying no people. And you know what? That's right. No people are sitting here. No people are here. To treat human beings like this, you have to be an animal. So you're right. No people indeed. There is no Bantu. There are no people here. Anyhow, the other song that I wanted to mention by Brenda Fassie, which I will put in the link below, is it's called Ubuntu, right? And the full phrase is Ubuntu, Ngubuntu, Wa Bantu. And that means people are people because of other people. Either we offer humanity to one another, or we relegate ourselves to the level of animals by treating others as if they're animals. So people are people because of other people. So again, thank you for listening. So many people asked me about this picture and if I would do a story time about this photo. And there's that. That was Uppity in South Africa. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys remember this story because I've hidden most of my old content. But you see all of us in this picture, we have on hoodies because again, it was cold. It was raining. Like, oh my God, when that song by Toto came on, I bless the rain down in Africa. Oh my gosh, like the students went nuts, because it would be raining, in South Africa. Anyhow, you see, one girl has on a shirt, it says University of Washington. The other girl has on a shirt, and there's a Somali flag in her high school. I have on a sweatshirt that belongs to the University of Washington, but it was a group called Empower. And there is a huge black power fist on the back of that shirt. And then, of course, Empower was an acronym, right? So I took off that little brown coat. Where in this photo, we are at a braai. A braai is what South Africans call, it's their word for barbecue. So I took off that little brown coat, once, the food and the lights and the heat got going or whatever. And there were these three Nazis that I'm a blonde. I didn't notice the swastikas. They were just dressed in all black and leather, and they were skinheads, they were bald, um, on purpose. But they called me over to them by myself. Um, and they asked me what my shirt says. And I showed them, I'm like, it says Empower. It's a registered student organization at my university. We're studying abroad. And I'm just, explaining. And then one of them says, turn around for me. And I moved my hair, and he grabbed my hood and pulled it up. Um, and I assumed he was pulling up my hood to read the back of my shirt. But of course, he still had me by the hood. So to onlookers, it was like a lynching joke, like hanging a black person. So of course the other two black girls, they've got common sense, they come over to me and they're just kind of with me, and it's the three of us and the three of them. Um and I'm having eh, I didn't notice. I didn't notice, okay? And so I'm talking, and they're like, "Say, are there any guys like us in your country? Any guys as cool as us?" And I made a joke. I was like, not as cool as you, not as cool as you are." But in my head, I'm just like, like you guys look like skinheads. Like, what's going?" I didn't know that they actually were skinheads. I didn't know that they actually were Nazis. Um, so when the two African girls went back to the group, all the white kids were like, "Oh my God, are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? Did they hurt you? Did they do anything to you? Blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "No, we're fine. We just had to go get chocolate." And, they were probably hoping something bad happened to me. So, they didn't care. And so the girls, the two African girls, the East African girls were like, "You didn't notice that those were Nazis?" And I was like, "They were?" They were like, "You didn't see them swastikas? You didn't see them red flags and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "No, I didn't. I wasn't paying attention." I don't know what I'd be looking at when I'd be talking to people. Like, I see people, but I don't give a whole lot of eye contact, and I don't necessarily pay attention to what somebody's wearing unless I like it. And I didn't like their outfit, so I didn't look. But these are some of the reasons why, my friends are now clocking me as neurodivergent. I don't see what everybody else sees. I see other things. But anyhow, the conversation was very subdued. To me, it was very respectful, but they were very loud and proud about their Nazism, and I didn't catch it. So I was a little bit shaken up, and I stood next to my professor for the rest of the night. And he's just like, "I've really got to keep a close eye on you." And he's like, "I know you're brave. I know you're strong. You're regal. You're beautiful, but you're really not safe here, among our group." He was like he was the most worried about me. Because you could tell, like, I was brave and I was on fire, but like there were a lot of things I just didn't get or understand. There were things that, like, being book smart, but kind of a blonde socially, with different social cues. And he's just like, I like he kept his hand on my back, and I thought it was hot, so I didn't mind. But he kept his hand on my back for a lot of the trip and just kind of would take me under his wing and take me wherever, because there's this combination between being attractive, but also being black and also being female and also being alone. That was just disaster waiting to happen. Like people would come up to our combi, they'd come up to our car, try to pull me out of it, grab me, propose. Um, so the mixture of racism, hatred, sexual attraction, um, and my extremely black power attitude is like you're not safe here. And he had taken us to a place where just a few years ago no blacks were allowed. So if anything, those Nazis were in their element and they were, in their hood and in their, it was this, upper class, exclusive, swanky, whatever. Um, I think they just started allowing blacks to work there. Um, and that was in the, 2000s. So, I mean, hey, to this day, there's still very blatant, very shocking racism in South Africa. Um, Regardless of all of the work, regardless of all of the amnesty hearings, regardless of all of the forgiveness and goodness that Africans have displayed, and it just goes to show that these people, the people of Nelson Mandela, the people of Trevor Noah, to date, Xhosa people are the most human people on the planet. I mean, of course, East Africans, all these, so many Africans with ancient bloodlines that are not mixed. They're 100% hominid. They do, in other words, they do not have a story of evolution where they come from, these monkeys and gorillas and these Neanderthals who are eventually human. That is the story of uh, palm colored people. And that is the story of many of Asian uh, people. But those who are just 100% African, 100% sub-Saharan African, they have always been human. And so when people are talking about humanity, they mean it. There's a reason, certain groups of people have been able to colonize and to break all kinds of wars and all kinds of Geneva Conventions and things like this. There's a reason people have been able to do things that are so ugly and animalistic. And no offense, because I mean, obviously, I'm not 100% African. So I don't remember if my blood type is positive or negative, but that means something. They're the eldest group of humans on Earth. And these Dutch and English people were trying to eradicate them, trying to ethnically cleanse the oldest group of humans that the evolution, we all come from them. And it's so funny because they look like these little black Asians. So they are that common ancestor between, well, some would say, that common ancestor between blacks and Asians. Anyhow, this is a story time about me in South Africa. And I've traveled abroad quite a bit. I've been to a number of different countries: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zanzibar, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, uh, Switzerland, the UK. So if you want to hear more stories, go on ahead and let me know. I'm Uppity and I'm out of here.